Welcome to Mōkaulele. Recording in progress. Welcome to Mōkaulele. Again, it's a space where we come and talk stories. We use storytelling to inform ourselves, inform each other, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. It's a way of gauging. It's a sort of GPS. Where are we on this map of living and functioning in this world? We call this Mōkaulele, and tonight we have Roxane. But I'm even more excited because when I entered academia, it's trained me to talk really good English. I could talk good English for 5 minutes, and then it was downhill after that. And then not only I was learning Hawaiian language and then take a class and then get a degree, then my teachers got me into a lectureship. I'm like, oh my goodness, I cannot even talk good English. And then a master's program and a doctoral degree. And you know what? I found that if I present my pidgin language in a certain framework, it becomes evocative. People want to hear it. It becomes alluring, and they want to support the rise of pidgin English and revitalization. So, if you've had me in college, you know that I can speak English for a good little while, and after that it's boom, boom. It's back to Waiahole Poi Factory English. That's where we're from, and I'm proud to say Hygienic Store was the mall, the kind of mall I grew up in, there in Kahalu'u, and I'm happy to have Mōkaulele together because Mōkaulele is a non-stuffy place that we can just have a conversation, talk story, whatever language you want to use. Um, and so long as we're respectful, we can inquire and we can kind of leave the hour and a half thinking about our own selves. Hey, where are we? You know, and again, the conversation here is on storytelling, on people's life, their leadership, and how they became a leader. And some of them don't use the word leader ever because it just goes against their character. It's just not it's not a word that they're familiar with or comfortable with, but their actions are very much leadership. So this is Mōkaulele, very relaxed. I want you guys to be comfortable. You can ask questions throughout. You can put it in the chat, and if it's desperate, you can raise your hand. We could just say that if your question, we might answer your question, but if your question is a little bit off color, we might say, we meet you in the chat, direct communication that way, yeah? So we want to do that. My name is Taupori Tangaro, and this program is brought to you by Isianti Gail over there, Makuakane, London. This is her Kipuka through her works at the University of Hawaii at Hilo and the Kipuka Native Hawaiian Student Center. And in collaboration with Hawaii Community College, our Iola Haloa Center for the Practice of Hawaiian Culture, we bring you Mōkaulele. Mōkaulele is, we're growing leadership. The 10 campus system of the University of Hawaii is committed in our strategic imperatives to grow leadership, indigenous leadership. So not just any kind of leadership, but indigenous leadership for the well-being of the indigenous, Hawaii indigenous, and all the indigenous that come to Hawaii for an education. And then all of us who not Hawaiian but live in Hawaiian territory, this is a great time to articulate why it is that you love Hawaii so much. Why are you still here? And not articulate that, but also articulate and bring into consciousness what we can do to keep Hawaii vibrant for the coming generations. Roxane, I knew as Roxane Stewart, skinny high school graduate from Kamehameha, skinny like the size of my pencil, and and she was never ever talked unless you spoke to her. And she was only, one of those students guaranteed the A students, boom. No matter what the challenge was, she made it an A all the time. I used to have my tiers my top tiers in my class, the ones that really respond to the movement, and the ones that just there, the light half on. So you just keep them there because you know that eventually maybe there's something in the class that can help them pull the cord, put the globe on, put the light on full bright. We have those varied talents in the classroom. Oh, Roxane was on the top tier. And she took all my classes and then helped with everything that Gail and I were doing on the campus. So we know Roxane for her verve, um, you know, just her unapologetic way of being herself. Very respectful, but non-apologetic. And how that transformed into the works that she do for Hawaii today. And again, she's going to share her story within the framework of our myth stories. And again, this framework, I got this framework from the Pele and Hi'iaka story. So we're using the same framework that we use to understand Pele and Hi'iaka to understand ourselves. Isn't that great? Closes the gap between the deity and the mortal. Bang, we're not that distant. But Roxane, from my earliest memories of her was always connected to the ocean in a way that I didn't see people her age connected. So without further ado, we're going to want to bring her on, but here's your homework. I don't want you to just listen to, oh, that's Roxane and that's her story. I want you to look for yourself in her story. This is a story of transformation. And that's a common theme worldwide, transformation. It doesn't, you don't have to be a particular gender to understand transformation, or you don't have to be a specific ethnicity to understand transformation. We've always been transforming. It's the law of biology. It's the law of the universe is to evolve and to transform in that evolution. So see your own stories. I might ask you questions. How many of you have a similar, scenario here? Or how many of you just made the worst choice in your life and you wish if you had a second choice? This is, we can get very, very, we only have a little bit. And my job is to get you to look into the mirror and have a conversation with yourself like, wow, Mary, where have you been all this time? I was so busy going to college, I totally forgot about you. Mary is my alter ego. No, I don't know who's Mary, but just Mary is just anybody. So have a conversation with your Mary, because we need Mary to be at full capacity. That's what our children need. They need leaders. And the only way we can create leaders if we ourselves are leaders, however we define that. So Roxane, before we go on with the hua, can you just tell us who you and who your family and where you're from? Make that connection for us,
Okay.
please.
Okay, aloha kako. I'm Roxane Keliʻikipikāneokolohaka, born and raised in Hilo, Hawaii. And Stuart is my dad's side. Both my mom and my dad were adopted by their stepfathers, interestingly enough. And I thought I saw Auntie Darlene Kepa on top here. Hi, Auntie. She's Ohana. Born and raised in Hilo. My Ohana was a fishing family. My grandma was Japanese, but she could do everything, I swear, from gardening to cooking all the kind Hawaiian food. And I think that's part of where what Tangaroa is saying, the verve comes from. She was a small Japanese lady, but nobody messed with Auntie Molly. And if she was still living today, the project on Kilauea Avenue would have been POW in 2 months, okay? And not 2 years. And they wouldn't have broke my water line 3 times. But anyway, so that's the kind of person that she was. My mom is the eldest. And she's typical firstborn Japanese, very astute, very yes. She take care of all the siblings. She was an educator, was a teacher, and then became an administrator. My dad was a police officer. My brother was a police officer as well. So kind of 2 big, heavy kuleana in the Oihana space for my parents. And I was not the oldest grandchild, my brother was, but because my mom was the oldest, I kind of had the kuleana, the residual kuleana that she had. So things that probably the eldest would have had. And my brother was a little bit unreliable and maybe different focus he had. So it defaulted to me. in some of the things that we were doing. And at the time, my grandma had koi pond in the backyard. I'm fortunate to have purchased her home, and now this is my space, and it's still the family gathering spot. So part of my kuleana now is to ensure that it always stays that kind of place for family. We used to have family dinners every Sunday. That was my grandpa's thing. No matter what you're doing, everybody got to come. Nowadays, I think for many of us, we probably had that growing up, and now it's getting harder and harder to be able to gather the family. And especially with COVID, it was very, very difficult to be so disconnected from family. And so we're now coming out of that, and my aunties are all older, so trying to keep them safe, but really realizing the impact that disconnect had on our family. Even though we didn't gather every Sunday, when COVID hit, the disconnection was just enormous. So we're slowly trying to figure out what that is again. And now I find myself as kind of the po'o, for lack of a better word, of the family now. And a lot of the childhood rearing, even though I wasn't paying attention to it back then as much, are things that I reflect back to and said, okay, that's why grandma made me do that, or that's why I had to do that with mom, or that's why we had to pile in the back of grandma's station wagon and go to the luapele and gather blackberries. All 6 of us in the back of the station wagon with kaumoros, all the way out. Yeah, all of those kinds of things. This is why we had to sit there and make the kind with the guava jam stick, the big thing with the cone with the pukas. I don't know what those are called, but I know how to use them. All of those kinds of things we reflect when we're older as to that's why. And not necessarily it was about, so we know how to make guava jam, because I don't know how to make the guava jam. But it's what that, I think what the discipline of those kinds of things taught us in being present in the moment, and really paying attention to what was what you were being trained in to do, even though you didn't know that was training. So my mom was a single mom for a long time. I went off to Kamehameha schools 7th grade. So if Hau'oli can pull up the first slide, my family was a fishing family, but it wasn't a place for us to be on the boat. That was mainly for the guys. So we could come and wash the boat after and help with the cleaning of the fish and stuff like that and just stand around, but we weren't really on the boat. But I remember from small kid time being pulled to the kai and just touching it and looking. I would spend hours by myself just looking at all of the things while all my cousins were playing with the other stuff. So I was just looking what was in the kai. Right. And so that kind of brought me to where I am, I guess today, flash forward, how I understand and how I don't understand that pull. And I can talk about that a little bit later.
We'll pause there. So Roxane, you are a Hilo girl.
Yes, born and raised Hilo.
Okay, Hilo. So, Hilo no ko'ui.
Just saying.
Yeah. Okay. So, all of you here, can you end sharing? So I can see everybody, and because she tell us where she's from. The thing is, we got to throw something in, yeah, like storytelling, yeah. Oh, where you from? Yeah, you never begin a story unless you always there's a little introduction. So, I would like for you to put in the chat where you're from, but don't press where from, yeah. So, where you from? And please don't tell me Oahu. That don't mean nothing to me. Tell me where you're from, like where in Oahu or where in America you're from, or if you're from a different part of the world, where are you now, physically now? Okay, so can you type it in, and don't press send yet, and we want to see that pop up. Okay, and on a count of 3, please press 1, 2, 3. Where are you from, Melanie and Cheat?
Oh.
Oh look, I get somebody in Panay.
Hopefully.
I get two people in Panay. Yeah, me and Ray. Okay, Orange County, Lihue, Waiakea.
Kailua, Kauai,
Okay, Orange County,
Maui.
Lihue, Orange
Pukalani.
County,
Kaena.
Squamish peoples, um, Hanapepe, Berkeley, Kaneohe, um, Pukalani, you're in Pahoa, Mahalo, Haiku, Honouliuli. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing your place. It really, really, really matters, the place where you're from or where you're at the time we're sharing these stories. Then my next question to you, how, first of all, and this you're going to raise your hand, yeah? So you're going to look at your reactions tab at the bottom of your screen and, um, or you're going to just clap. I don't even see, oh, there's the raise hand there.
Yeah.
You can press that. So how many of you are eldest, just the eldest child, whether you're happy being the eldest or not? And it doesn't matter if you're
Wow.
legitimate or illegitimate, just you're the pukamua, you're the first child, yeah? How many raise your hand? I am that.
Many.
Oh yeah, wow. That'd be fun. Yeah, we should take a survey of what kind of people come to Mōkaulele. All us eldest children with issues trying to figure out our lives because
Free therapy.
our parents have put so much kuleana on our hands. Now, how many of you? Thank you. I gotta go to the next page over here. This is great. How many of you are not the eldest, but because of your aptitude, because of your natural trait systems, have become the eldest? The kuleana of the eldest has fallen upon you. Raise your hand. Okay. Alrighty. Wow, that's a lot of hands. Okay. I like to think that you're here because Mōkaulele is helping us figure out how to make good that kuleana. Yeah. That's telling me a lot by just seeing all your hands because sometimes being the eldest with this kind of kuleana, isolates us. We're like in between the generations. Yeah. We got to talk for the young ones to the adults. We're like the intermediaries. It's not the funnest place of
There we
time.
go.
And there's different ways of that kuleana. So this is like the club of the eldest children. Yeah, like wow. Okay. um, Now the thing is, in Hawaii, and some of you this might be close to some of you still, and this might be just totally foreign to you, but in Hawaii, the eldest child holds a lot of responsibility, and it's not just for Indigenous Hawaii. I see it in the world that I travel, the eldest. And I want to question that. Why is that the eldest? I've never questioned it. Why is it the eldest? No matter where you're from in the world, the eldest, a lot of kuleana is placed on the eldest. The only way out is if you screw up, and then they go look for the next eldest. Yeah. But the eldest sure get a lot of kuleana, and I wonder why that is. I don't know the answer to that, but I see all these hands coming up and I want to investigate it. So now, with this framework I'm talking about, because now I'm going to ask Roxane to share her life within this particular framework so we can follow. Yeah, so the framework just allows us to be in one room at the same time. Like, okay, we're all in the kitchen, let's talk kitchen things. Okay, we're all in the pala. What is pala in English?
Ah, that
Living
is
room.
the living
Living
room. Yeah, yeah,
room. Oh yeah, in the old days they used to say parlor, but many of us cannot pronounce a parlor. We can't say that. We're not designed to have
Pala.
that kind of sounds come, so we say pala. Yeah. So if we're in the pala, we're talking pala. And we're in the sleeping room, the bedroom. We're in the bedroom. So this framework just allows us to be and identify within a particular space of thought. Okay, so there's 5 spaces. One is the hua. The hua is the beginning, the egg, the conception. Yeah, the formative years. You can write it down if you want to, but some of you guys, you don't need to write. You can remember that. We have the ha'alele. Ha'alele means to fly, to depart, like a canoe that ha'aleles. the canoe actually departs and goes into the ocean. The plane, ha'alele, is it goes into the sky. So the ha'alele is the point in our life where we made a conscious decision to step in a direction, to step and explore a potential, a curiosity, a call. Okay, that would be the ha'alele. The huakai is the actual journey itself. Huakai, again, you have the word hua and you have kai. So in a huakai, a journey, you have many huas. You have a big journey myth, you have many small stories. So the huakai can get a little complex because we have a life story and then we have all these microcosm stories that make up the macrocosm. And so the huakai is like your day to day, your journey. What was it like? Those, like if you're a mother, your journey as a mother, what were some of those days when you're like, yes, this is the decision, you made the right decision, and you just feel whole. You just feel full. And then that's one day in your huakai. And then something happens and you just go, oh my Lord, was I really cut out for this? Am I really the perfect person? Oh, what happened? I sure made a wrong decision. Never doing that one again. Those days of setback. You can use that as a student. Those days are, yeah, yes, I'm in the right place. This is where I ought to be. And then some days you question yourself and your decision. Should I really be here? Did I make the right choice? Okay, that would be the huakai. The ho'ina is the we have hua, ha'alele, huakai. The ho'ina means to return. So as the canoe will ha'alele, the canoe has to return. So your journey, you bring your journey back. You go into life and you live, and now you come back matured and experienced. And how is your journey impacting? How do you integrate elements of your wisdom, your experience, your traumas? Because sometimes traumas are the best teaching tool, but although they're very painful. How do they get incorporated in your community, your ho'ina? How does your benefit? When you go out on a journey, you're expected to bring things home for your family. So this would be your service. What do you do for your family now? What are you capable of doing that will make them a happier place, a happier place, a secure place? And then your ha'ina. What recommendations do you have for up and coming leaders, or people that's been leading but just hit a few walls? And everybody has a ha'ina. Like the end of the song, many of our songs have ha'ina. We sing that verse, and we echo the most meaningful thought of that song. So what is your ha'ina? And today, this might be our ha'ina. Tomorrow, the ha'ina might change, and depending on who you're talking to. But those are the 5 arenas. I'm going to ask Roxy to share her story. And then, if we have time, I'm going to be asking you, what was your hua like? What was your hua? What is your call? At what point did you ha'alele, you investigate that call? You left all your comfort zone and you stepped into the unknown to investigate that call. What was your journey like? As a result of your journey, what are you doing for your community? How is your community a better place because of what you bring to it? And your ha'ina, what words of wisdom do you have for our community? Okay. Alrighty, so we're gonna begin. Let me go here and I'll press that. So Roxy, the first one we want you to share is your hua, your early years, the egg, hua conception, but it could be your formative years. What was and you shared a little bit of what your domestic life was like,
Yeah.
because that really sets our if it's it sets our initial steps as we move forward. So can you share with us again your hua, and if you have any photos attached to it, you can share it here.
Yes. So the family part, another part of the hua, I think, was my family, particularly the females in my family. Always stress the kuleana of the matriarchal line, going back generations. So my mom was the firstborn, and I kind of had 2 moms. One was that one, and my auntie Margot. Some of you may have known her. She worked DHL office long time. Another one, she makes things move in that office, and she fights ferociously for her people. But she was like my second mother. So the 2 of them kind of had different approaches and different essences, and those are the things that kind of built me. I pulled things from both of them. And I remember from small kid time having this, not just the pull to the kai, but specifically a fascination with humpback whales. Like, you know, when you're small and then you get people, let's see, if it's girls, you get the Barbie doll or the My Little Pony. If it's boys, you get the transfer or whatever, the thing that they're attached to. And when they get it, they're like so happy to get it. For me, I was the easiest person to shop for. Get me a humpback whale sticker or a pencil, and I'm like, yes, I'm your best friend. And who the hell is thinking about a humpback whale at like 7, 8 years old? I don't know. I don't even know how I got that, when I first saw one, or how I even knew what it was, but there was some sort of draw to that. And that's what kept me going back and back, into that space. Because even if we weren't able to get to the kai, I had all of my little kanaloa, well, now I know them as kanaloa things, but all my humpback whale stuffs, all my dolphin stuffs, all in my room, from that very young age. And I would just kind of be in my own space with them. But other than that, I think the other real big part of that rearing, was in college, with my family doesn't have a particular practice. Like we come from a Levite family, but again, I can't do the kind things. My grandma farmed, but we didn't. My mom and we lived separate from her. So fast forward, and I think a big part of where the hua, the formation, comes was in college, with Tangaro and with Auntie Gail. The Hawaiian Leadership Development Program was a huge part. And it wasn't so much, when I think back, yes, we had courses, and we took all of Tangaro's courses as part of that. But what I think was the forming part, the molding part, was that we were out in community right away in all kinds of different facets, whether it be putting on the Hawaiian Leadership Conference, whether it be WIPSI and all of those kinds of things. We're 20, 21, 22, and we're being sent out in 98 to train communities in mass. Like there's 5 of us, we hop on a plane and we go and we teach them these chants, these dances, and we're going into other people's communities. And so we were kind of thrown there. And this was way back before that was a thing. And so when we look at what that kind of formation does, the other component of that was the community that we built as students. We were never by ourselves, one person going kind of thing. It was this community, and we all relied on each other. One of the funny memories that I have is WIPSI opening ceremonies was at Wong Stadium. So if you can picture Wong Stadium, okay, with the football and all that kind of stuff, but this is an indigenous conference, people from all over the world. And on the pitcher's mound, there's this small group of 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old students, and we're supposed to receive all of the congregations, right? So every time a group came up, they would do their whatever, we had to respond. And we're all on the pitcher's mound. We're all like, okay, so what are we gonna do? And Tangaro guys are not there. It's just us. We're thrown into that situation, and we had to rely on each other and be quick. And the pressure of, one, no make shame, not so much for our immediate hui, but we're representing Hawaii on some aspects. And we realized the gravity of this kind of space. But even then, I was like, this is freaking trippy. Someplace that I always went to watch my brother's football games. Now we huli that space into this exchange between cultures. And it wasn't scripted. The only thing scripted was, here's the line and somebody gonna go, and then you're gonna have this thing and whatever. But all of that was just whatever came out. And for many people, that's a very uncomfortable space to be in, where it's not like step by step and you're not sure. And so from early on, those kinds of experiences made that almost the norm, I think, is to not have to go by the script. Even when we went to the Capitol for the 48-hour vigil, Senate Bill number 8, kill it.
Kill it.
Kill it. Yeah. Protesting on the side, all of the halal coming together to fight for our gathering rights, like to be a part of that mass movement of a collective in your early 20s was very formative in not just the experience of being part of a collective, but seeing the power of a collective. And it wasn't like we had meetings with everybody and this is what's going. Everybody just kind of moved, and there was the core group of people, but everybody moved in sync almost. And so to see that at that capacity in those kinds of platforms were very formative for me. And the imagery of it are still things that pop into my mind all the time. We may not remember the details of an experience, but think back to something in your life where you're cannot quite put your finger on why that image keeps popping in, but there's a formidable image that keeps popping in, and there's some sort of like couple words or something that you're equating to that image and that experience that becomes the anchors.
So now this hua is an interesting. Oh, no, see, it's getting exciting at this conversation. The rain is coming.
I hear it.
Let me try close some doors.
Cheering, kulu kulu wa. Yeah, everybody cheers. Did you bring your drinks? Did you not bring your beverages? Ino, yes, cheering.
Okay. Whew. Alrighty. A couple of things. You know how her and this is stuff that we can translate into actions. She talked about the whales. She's young, age 7, and she's wanting whales, humpback whales. And she used the word fascination. Now, the word fascination is taken on a negative connotation these days. Maybe it's because because we don't do anything about the fascination. We just create a life of being fascinated. But I think fascination as an indicator of the person's call. So let's look at reflect. Did you have a fascination as a child? What was that fascination? And is that fascination being played out today in some form? Because if you had a fascination for humpback whales, but then you're now a computer genius, what is the relationship between the two? That's one question. Maybe whales are about migrating in the oceans, and computer technology is migrating knowledge through these systems. So you can look at it that way if I had to really do a stretch. But another thing is, if as a child you're fascinated with this, and now as an adult, it's a core fascination. It's not a transient fascination. It's the one that stays with you for years, and people can identify you by it. But you had this core fascination in your formative years. When you were in that space, you felt something that you felt nowhere else. Now that you're an adult, where is that core fascination? Is it still part of what you do? Or has it just been aborted somewhere? Or have you put it on the side because you've made a life for yourself in sustaining other people's core fascinations? So I'm using this fascination idea as an indicator of where are we, because when you do GPS, you got to start somewhere, and where are we in this? So I want you to begin thinking about, as a child, did you have a fascination? What was your fascination? And don't worry if you don't have one or you had too many, but at least, because we still give birth to children and they have these fascinations, but typically what we do is say, stop that, diversify your toys. If all she wants is humpbacks, but we say, no, diversify your toys. And boys gotta play with this and girls gotta play with this, and we kill an opportunity of learning the call of our children. So oftentimes parents, however you define parenthood, like she defines her maternal, her mother and her auntie in almost equal terms. That's her family. So however you define family, are we supporting the nature of our children, and then nurturing that nature so that it's beneficial to them and to the community? Or are we truncating it? I'm tired of getting you humpback whales. Oh my God! Can you do something else? Okay, and so that'd be one. And the other is, she got the discipline. She didn't always understand what she was doing, but she studied environments, the boat. She studied situations, probably studied people, because that's the job of a good eldest person, is they study their people, so they communicate differently. They're very effective in communicating because you have multi-generational family. They communicate differently. So that's another one. And the other thing you might want to consider is, because a lot of people don't want to talk about, or they're uncomfortable talking about leadership because they didn't grow up with that as a domestic word. Oh, are you going to be a leader? What kind of leader would you like to be? It's not something we talk about in our families. You can't say, hi, I'm a leader. Hi, I would like to be the leader. Or you get slaps. Because we don't use that word. Our kind of leadership is action. And we demonstrate the leadership. So they don't say, oh, I would love for you to lead on the protocols committee for, on Ava ceremonies. They never say that. Lead. It's more like, I need for you to do an Ava.
Yeah, go do them.
I need for you to go, this canoe is landing, you gotta chant them in. Okay, but those are all evidences of this intergenerational trust, when the older generation is telling the younger generation, do this, because they're a leader. So again, we've been doing it, we just don't identify with the language, the semantics of it. I like the fact that she said a lot of the cultural arena. From her family, she got the essentials: how to work hard, how to stick to the task until it's done, how to be reliable, how to be all of those are transferable. And she transferred them into her academic arena. And interestingly, she said she was thrown immediately into community. All your classroom learning had to be acted out in community, in service to these other communities that she never visited before. Sent on a plane to go train other and I can tell you I can tell you something, because I'm really selective with who. So it may appear she did say, there was no it was kind of no agenda, it's kind of, but there was a lot of thought on who would stand on that mound. So not anybody could stand on that mound, because one, we represented Hawaii. There's at no time we were just representing ourselves. When we stand on that pitcher's mound to welcome the world, we were the embodied ancestor welcoming, and we needed to make sure that the people that were on the mound could pull it off. And you notice that some people were not on the mound because little bit sometimes they lope, that's not their talent area. The talent is in another area. So that's part of leadership. You never shove somebody on the wrong canoe, because you could injure them and you could injure everybody else on that canoe. You always have to have multiple canoes, so that people like Roxy could get on that canoe. The other people, they could drive. The other people could serve Ava. So you gotta have multiple canoes, so everybody has an opportunity to demonstrate their proficiency. In fact, sometimes we inherit or we get groomed to think we're inadequate. And now that I'm older, I realize I am not inadequate. The world I was living in was inadequate. They didn't have the canoe necessary that I could demonstrate my proficiencies. So the next time we think somebody is inadequate, let's look back and say, well, maybe they're inadequate here, but what if maybe this is not their space of performance? What is their space of performance? And so that's the kind of questions I want us to begin thinking about. And then, what was your canoe? What was your proficiency? Where could you prove your worth? And what was some of those canoes you were asked to get on that really was a horrible experience? It reflected all your fears and inabilities. I think some of you are really young, so you may have not had a long time in those experiences. But some of us, kind of middle age, I think we've experienced all kinds of canoes. And so, we're educators. And even if you're a student, you're still an educator. You're educating your teacher, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. So, let's look at diversifying the canoes so that, but Roxy, you're top tier. My top tier were the people that could do ritual, that knew how to respect, and they were reliable. Those were, top tier. And then some of them, they're hardworking, not very respectful. They go dig imu. They go dig imu. Because that's a valuable. We need imu. We need imu, and that's their proficiency. So give them something to stretch that proficiency. So let's begin thinking about that. Now we're only at the hua.
Yeah.
Roxane, the ha'alele, the point in time when you said, okay, I have my family, they gave me the essentials, I have my university experience, they gave me the experience, they gave me the community, the ability to build community beyond my family. They gave me a support system. Your ha'alele, when you identified a journey that only you could go on, and it would be because it's your call. Do you have a place on a time, whether in your calendar or in your brain, when you began to realize you're going to investigate this humpback whale? I'm using the humpback whale as a metaphor. You're going to investigate this fascination. Can you speak to that, ha'alele?
Yeah, and I think I have one instance that kind of saddles on both the hua and the ha'alele. So Hau'oli is going to bring up slide 2, and that was becoming a kako'o. So this was happening in my early 20s in the college life of all of this kuleana with the university. And then in my personal life, outside of my family, I became a kako'o to 2 huge parts of my life at that time. So I was dancing hula for Ivalani Kalima. And at the same time, starting my freshman year in college, I went for actually healing myself. And then I became a kako'o to my Auntie Lina Ala Brown Dombriguez and my Uncle Ikaika Dombriguez in the practice of Lomi Lomi Lapa'au. And so in both spaces, I functioned as the kako'o. And we hear that word all the time in the verb tense of that's the kako'o. Somebody can bring their kako'o with them. But it's in that time that I really learned that ko'o part. Like, what is it that I am responsible for propping up or supporting or standing for? So in both cases, with Lomi Lomi Lapa'au, we're dealing with healing. And in some instances, they're intimate one-on-one with patients. And other times we'd be out in community training hundreds of people in this practice, or doing clinics with masses. And on the hula side, as a dancer in the line, moving beyond that and becoming the kako'o to my kumu, but more so to my kumu's kumu, Uncle George Naope. So that was a huge deal for me because that's my kumu's kumu, and the trust that she's given to me to malama him. And if we know Uncle George, he goes everywhere and everybody like be with Uncle George. And so part of that ko'o was, and he aloha everybody, but there needs to be some sort of space and making sure that he's all good, whether it be in preparing him for ceremony. That was my first time tying and getting Uncle ready. Was like my hands were so shaky. My hand went slip when I was tying his kihei, almost knock his face. He's like, "I try to punch me out first thing." And then another instance, I remember we were at a hula competition, and I was with him in his room. And my kumu said, "Okay, get this ready. This is gonna be his what he gonna wear, and make sure it's all pressed." And when I went to the room, it was his gold bedazzled, what you call it, outfit. And I'm thinking to myself at 22, how the hell do you iron metal? So that it's like, I'm like full panicking because he needs to be presentable and, all of these kinds of things. But in both situations, again, I'm learning a lot about paying attention, moving as they move, anticipating what they need, guarding in some instances. If you know my kumu, she's Miss Aloha, Mary Monarch at her halau all the time. And yeah, I gotta be security because some people just, no bilang. But in either situations, it's being able to, those are the spaces where I learned how to move, anticipate, and adapt quickly for different reasons in different scenarios. And I'm up until the point where we were, taking care of Uncle when he was in the ICU at Queens with his passing. All of these kinds of things puts you in different contextual situations, but the key things that you need to do are kind of the same. Yeah, the things that you bring to that situation are same, just the context changes. And so you have to adapt a little bit to that. And in looking at the huaka'i space that I'll talk about a little bit later, these things were crucial to arming me with the kahua that I have now to do the work that I do. So that was one ha'alele. And I consider it ha'alele because it was me, right? It could have been anybody else in our halau, but kumu chose me to do that. And so it was having to navigate that, having to step out of the line or step out of the circle into this space. And there's times to be behind them and times to be in the front, and knowing when that is. And I think the other big ha'alele was when I changed direction in my career path. So from small age, I was like, I'm going to be the one to be with the ocean peoples all the time. That's what I want to do. I want to do research. I want to know what's going on. I want to be able to advocate them. We need to have, they cannot be endangered, all of these things. So that was my plan. And then I majored in marine science right away at UH Hilo. I knew exactly, like there's not many freshmen that know exactly what they want to major in, exact path, but I knew it. And I was like, that's going to be me. And then I took an internship. So internships are great, okay? Because that's your chance to try a little bit and see if you like it. It's like, the sampler on the poo-poo. Ooh, a little bit too spicy down. No. So I was working on Maui as a naturalist aboard the Navatech and the Maui Nui Explorer. So that's the pictures that you see there on the that you saw earlier with me on the boat. And from that internship, what I didn't know was, yeah, you're going to be out on the boat researching and being with all of these ocean peoples, but you also have to, as the naturalist, work with the tourists. And that was like, real quick, I figured out I don't like work with tourists. So real quick, I was like, oh my God, this is the pathway that I want. But a lot of the research at the time in the late 90s, it was partnered with these kind of tourist vessels, right? Because they had the means to go out every day. And so people like Hawaii Wildlife Fund that I was working for that's kind of the exchange. We'll give you a naturalist and we can do our research and stuff like that. So lesson for everybody, it's totally okay to have an internship and know that's exactly what I never want to do again, work with tourists. And then when I came back to school to finish out in marine science, it was the biggest, the biggest major at UH at the time. And when I looked around and how many of us were graduating, there I could count on my hand maybe this amount of brown people from the Pacific. Everybody else was coming from the mainland. I was like, what the hell is going on? Why are there not our local people here getting this degree so that we can take care of our own oceans? We are the best people to do that. And so when I talked with my professors, they were saying the local kids just aren't applying. So the draw is from the mainland. And so I made the decision to go into education, to become a teacher with the sole purpose of, I want to see more of our local kids in marine science, in the biologies, in the never have forestry kinds of things like they do now, but our local kids need to be in there. So for me, that was a hard one because that meant I'm away from the ocean. I'm what I thought at the time was I'm giving that up because this is the bigger need. We need our people here. And inevitably, hopefully what I was hoping for was that I could influence in some space, make our kids really, really ready. And then that they would go on and they would be infiltrating all of those ocean spaces. And I'm proud to say that I do have a bunch of my haumana that are in those spaces and a bunch of other haumana like Hau'oli that are in other spaces that are doing great. But it still was, to me, what I thought at the time was a big personal sacrifice of what I thought my pull was. Mm-hmm. So that was a hard one for me. And I saw my mother just killing herself as an educator. And I was like, I don't want that life. God, that sucks. But I ended up doing that. And I've been a teacher for over 25 years now. But in that time, over those decades, I learned how to teach in a way that was like, you guys, all my nephews, you guys, all my children, to teach in a way that, yeah, we still got to do the standards, but let's approach it through this perspective, our Native Hawaiian perspective, our local perspective, making it relevant. Teaching in charter schools, I had the opportunity to be able to have our lokoi as a classroom for my students. So how do we get our keiki back into Aina? This is well before Aloha Aina was the thing, right? Luckily, it is where it is now. But at that time, kids were still maybe on one excursion a quarter, they could go to Aina or whatever. I was fortunate to have it right across the street. So every opportunity that I had. So those were all the things that prepared me. Again, I'm bringing all of those kinds of experiences and rearings into the work that I'm doing now.
Mm-mm. So, this ha'alele, I like the idea you brought up kako'o, because that seems to be, and I haven't thought about it much, but I put in a chat, a simple definition of kako'o, and that is definitely a form of leadership. And there's a lot of trust in that, because they're giving you an opportunity to care for gems, whether the gem is a person or the knowledge that person holds. And and so there's a particular way in which they want that to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And that material is called lame. It's not metal.
Shiny metal.
Yeah, only George could put it up. It's called lame. So the kakao one is a great one, because many of our people, they demonstrate their leadership through their support of other people. And so they like to say, oh yeah, I'm a background support. But, I rather just hear I'm a support, I'm a kakao. Because background, we try to, it implies that we don't want to be seen, or we're comfortable being in the back there and unrecognized. But if our kids cannot see us, they're going to look for other leaders. They're going to look for other motivations. So at one point, we got to redesign how we could think this way when the whole world was just only Hawaiians, when there was just Hawaiians in Hawaii. Then you could agree to certain cultural terms, But Hawaii is in a modern time. There's a lot of intermarriage. There's a lot of cross-fertilization of thoughts and resources. And so our children will understand us in their modern terms. And so sometimes we have to come out of that comfortable zone and let them know that even as a kako'o, because even on our campus, sometimes our staff, whenever they get to talk, not all, but whenever they get to talk, they always belittle their service. Like, I'm just a staff member. I cannot do my work without a staff member. They're more important many days than I am. Because they figure out all of these details. I can't function without. Many of us cannot function without that kind of support. So my job is to get people to say, can you just stop saying I'm just a staff member? Just tell us your name and tell us what you do, but no need belittle, because that kako'o is huge. You're not just ironing the old man's clothes. This is a man that has affected the world. His ancestors, he walked alongside his ancestors and him, you're ironing clothes that all of them were going to wear. And he wasn't, when he was put in that electric chair, you had to chase him, It's like, he wasn't an easy guy to watch because he just, he was an agenda, he was hilarious.
Yeah.
But
apologizing to the kitty deli when he went bang him in with his scooter. So sorry.
So sorry.
Good times. Good times.
Good times. So I like that ha'alele. So guys, the kako'o piece is a huge ha'alele. So let's look at the time we demonstrate our leadership through kako'o. So ask us the question, let me ask you the question, who did you help last? Who did you help last? Who were you assigned? And not just, anybody, but who of value have you helped last? It could be family value. It could be your profession's value. It could be a cultural value. Because that's a great opportunity. Let me tell you, I worship my hula teachers. So after the performance, everybody was going out to go party or go smoke their cigarette or whatever, I was right back there carrying their pahu, their ipu. I ironed their clothes if they wanted. I make their lei if they. Because I felt connected, deeper. I felt a deeper sense of being when I was with them, more with that generation than my own generation. And I'm sure a number of you here, because we're eldest and we have to function as eldest, that we're caught in between the generations. And many of us, if we're influenced by the grandparents have huge impact on formative traits. Yeah. The other thing is your sacrifice, your moana. I love that you brought that up. Part of your ha'alele was knowing that you couldn't always just be in the ocean. That there wasn't enough. There was only like this much people that could speak our ocean terms. And I assume you said there people like us from the Pacific. So I guess they were not just Hawaiians. There were our cousins.
People from Yap. Yeah.
And the ocean required a larger participation. You needed to. Your question was, how do we get our people in the ocean, or concern, and to be fascinated again? We come from the ocean. Some genealogies say we come from the stars. Some genealogies say we came over the canoes. And then some of us have both genealogies and we find no conflict. But, how do we get our people back into the ocean and to be fascinated again? I don't know, because some people's ocean is in the mountain. It's their mountaintops. That's their ocean, or it's their, as my granddaughter would say, can I go I would like to see the jungle. She's talking about the forest. Yeah. So, we're going to go into the huaka'i, but the fact that you had to leave the ocean, to grow more ocean people.
Mm.
And that's some of the stuff that we have to do. We want to go in this straight line, but for it to be sustained, we reach a particular maturity when we say it's not just about us. It's not just about me and my humpback. It's about all of us. And so how do I grow more people? How do I grow opportunities for kids to be fascinated with nature around them? Because the more technologically we get, the more disconnected from our ancestors our children become. So those are some solid, sobering questions we need to ask. And we got to make decisions, because 20 years from now, 30 years from now, they're going to judge us on the decisions we make today. Just like we even judge our grandparents. I mean, Roxane's Japanese grandmother could have just neglected her. But no, she never. Her auntie could have just neglected her. No, she never. So Roxane can stand because people made it their business to contribute to her. So those are some of the stuff we're going to talk about. Now we're at that's so we did the ha'alele. That was her departure, yeah, into the kako'o realms, and then becoming an educator. The very thing she didn't want to become, she had to become. Yeah, isn't that a great wake up call?
Ugh.
Now the hua kai, you see hua again, and kai is a sequence of hua. Roxane, can you share with us? Let's begin. I'm going to ask you to share with us one of those magic moments when you know you're in the right space, and
Oh,
one of the moments when when you it the moments required that you visit some of your own deep fears and
mm,
mo'os, and what did you do in those moments? How did you deal with those moments? So let's talk about the moments that you gotta say, yeah, I'm in the
yeah.
right place and I was born for this moment.
Okay. So this is the holy crap moment. Yeah. So when we have that saying that things happen for a reason, and it's usually people tell us that when we never get good news. Well, things happen for a reason. Like, frick, I don't want to hear that. But this is one of those, oh my gosh, yeah, things happen for a reason. So I was teaching, and I felt that I needed to move. I needed to transition out. Things weren't, yeah, I just needed to move out of a certain space. And then I applied for another teaching position and got down to the last two. And then I got the call, we're going with somebody else. And I'm like, damn it, frick. So I ended up staying where I was. But I don't know if the word is happenstance. That word comes to mind, but I kind of don't know what it means. But I think so. It's like, what I'm talking about. So I got a call from, I was working in Kyokaha at the time. And then I got a call about monk seal stuff. So they knew my background, and they wanted me to give someone on monk seal things that were coming through, regulations. And then I went to that, and then oh, did you know that we're actually opening a cetacean rehab facility in Kyokaha, not even 2 minutes from where I was working. I was like, oh really? Yeah, could you do the opening ceremony for us? I said, oh, okay. So there was the Hawaii Cetacean Rehab Facility that was being opened where Pakrack is now. Again, the old sewage treatment plant. Yeah, that they keep saying never had sewage, but yeah, hello. Anyway, over there was the space. And so I said, yeah, sure. So I met with the director, and we kind of work through, this is what the ceremony, so a little bit training so that he knew, moka piko, and this is what you do, and all this, these are the chants we're going to do, kind of thing like that. And then he asked, it got to the point where I eventually became part of that network. So this was like right place, right time, because if I got that other job, I wouldn't have been in that space during this time. So the facility was dedicated in 2009. And from there, I became a part of the Marine Mammal Response Network in Hilo, and learned the protocols on the NOAA side on how to respond. And so if you were there in 2009, you would see us running through Kyokaha from Old Airport with the inflatable dolphin, because we're practicing all of our protocols. So we're trained and ready to go. 2010, we had our first patient. And this is the kind of, you get the call, you got to drop everything and go. And our first patient was Waikini, all the way in Miloli'i. So dropped everything. We trekked all the way down to Miloli'i, brought the striped dolphin Waikini back, and we weren't successful in his rehabilitation, but in a matter of like a week's time, we had, the director and I had talked about how do we merge protocols so that there's an infusion of cultural practice in the response. We put that on a Friday. The Monday was literally the call for this one. So talk about like, you know, that, okay, the gods have a plan here and I'm not cute to it, but they're moving me in all of these spaces. And we continued that work into 2011. And I think this was kind of the first, technically the first inklings of what is now Kia'i Kanaloa, the statewide network of Kanaloa practitioners, because we got a call that there's a Blainesville beak whale that had stranded in Maui. And one of our Kia'i, I'm not sure if he's still on the line, but Dane Maxwell's papa, Uncle Charlie Maxwell, was along him and Vernon Kalanikau were the practitioners responding there. So fast forward, they're flying this Kanaloa to Hilo, and we're having to care for someone else's Kanaloa. So think about when you gotta watch somebody's, when you gotta babysit a niece or nephew or a friend's child or whatever, same kind of thing, but 100 million times more pressure. Yeah, so we had to figure out what that was like. So it was daily talking on the phone with myself and Uncle Charlie. It was a 24/7 with myself and Kealoha Pishora at the time. And so we cared for this Kanaloa over the course of 2 weeks. On record, it's, I believe, the longest or tied the longest that a Kanaloa of this magnitude has been kept alive in captivity for rehab. So we're thrust again into this space where no more there's not a book I can look in the archives. I haven't done it yet, and I wish we had more time. Like that was my full-time job, to just research in the Nupepa Olelo Hawaii. But I'm pretty sure there isn't a mo'olelo or a chant that talks about when you are going onto the tarmac and receiving a Kanaloa from a C-130 Coast Guard plane, this is what you do. Or when you're 24/7 in a tank where this Kanaloa isn't supposed to be, this is what you do. So this is where I'm pulling all of that experience from UH, from WIPSI, from being a kako'o, from being able to adapt the many things that my own students taught me over the years. I'm pulling all of that now, because now we almost have to create an entire new practice. We have to evolve a traditional practice, this connection that we have with our elder ocean peoples, but in a very different way. So
that piece right there, before we go further onto that piece. So we're in 2022. Yeah. So, you know, when we look at all of our old stories that were published, nobody's talking about the carrying of, you know, injured, you know, it wasn't identified. The nature at that time was not having the impact that it has now. So she nailed it. So what she's done, she's taken her childhood rearing from her and her auntie, her grandmother, her kakoa experience with the healing masters, the hula masters, the community building, and the content and skills, the cultural content and skills she got through the university system. Now all of that is constellating.
Yeah.
Why? Because no more precedent. And that's what some of our people are sometimes uncomfortable with, because we always have to walk with one foot in the past and one foot in the future, and we got to kind of straddle both worlds. Sometimes we're afraid to to, unconsciously injure the values. So sometimes we don't want to evolve it, or sometimes people just use it as an excuse. Well, our ancestors never did it, but they never had to do
Yeah.
it. They never had to save a mountain. They never had to. They never had these big drag nets in the ocean that's just scooping up everything and then just left to die. They never had to deal with that. So what do? We have to build the precedent, and that's one of those things about leadership. Oftentimes we'll find ourselves at an opportunity. We either create the precedent or we just submit to the processes and spend one more generation pushing the cart sideways and just slapping Monstera on it and calling it a Hawaiian float. You know, we don't want our life cannot come down to just float pageantry. There's a lot of hard work, and the fact that you pulled it all together. It didn't come from just one. It came. There's even ironing the lame. How do you iron metal? That was a good question.
Yeah.
That's a profound mythological question. How do you iron metal? You have to figure it out. And so this is like, how do you educate people? Well, you create curriculum. How do you how do you build, how can these ancient people hear the ancient voice, the human voice of care and nurture to help them heal? How do you know when they're going to die? How do you transition them, into the next realm? We're not born with those content and skills in front of us. It's in us, and our world brings it up. Yeah. So that's something to think about. And so I want you to think about those moments when you had to create a precedent because there was none. It was either you create a bridge or you cannot cross over. And you stuck. Yeah. Roxane, share with us one of those moments where you're scared, just scared and injured and dark and maybe alone. Did you have any of those moments when you just you wasn't sure if you was able to pull through?
I think being on the tarmac and knowing what's in front of me, like I'm actually on the tarmac and I'm going to be receiving this kanaloa from another island. That was a scary moment. But we got to be quick. So I got to suck it up, put that in a little box someplace, and then just move. And what ended up happening was the relationship between us as the Kia'i and Noah kind of disintegrated after that. But people knew of our work. And so community continued to call upon us to kako'o them when there were kanaloa that washed on their shore or there are kanaloa in distress on their islands. And so it's not like we didn't take out advertisement or anything, but what they underestimated, they meaning Noah, is how interconnected our communities are. And we just know who we can pull, right? And who we can go to. And that's the power, I think, of the collective, that we sort of see collective when there's a big mass of people, but there's also the more, I don't say elusive, but the more transparent collective that who you can go to and who's going to be a resource. And so Hau'oli is going to pull up slide 4. This was probably the darkest period that we had. The most kanalua, the most anger, the most frustration. We responded, we were called by community in the Kauai High area to respond to this pilot whale that had stranded in Kauai High. And so myself and Kelohe Pishoda, we went there. And long story short, we called the people of that place. Part of our practice is, yes, we're not going to tell no community no. It doesn't matter if we're not from there or not. We're there as kako'o. So we can bring us in to do what we do with the kanaloa, but they are the ones calling the shots in terms of the care. They're the one whose ancestors walk in that space for generations. And so they're directing us. So they may not know how to do what we do in the kai with the kanaloa, but they are the ones telling us this is what we would want to see, whether it's saying no to euthanasia, which was one of the things that happened in this case. Community said no, we will not allow this kanaloa to be euthanized. We take we take our cues from them. So we're in the water. Eventually, the government peoples they go. There's articles that have been written. You guys can read up about that. But long story short, we ended up the kanaloa ended up passing naturally, which is what we want. These are our akua. These are our elders. It's not for us to say this is when you are going to pass. Our job at that moment is to help support transition ceremonially. We don't decide for them, they decide. But in our workings with them, we've learned a lot about what that entails. So part of that ceremony also included at-sea burial. So we returned the kanaloa to the po iho'i ole mai. And we were later charged for violating the Marine Mammal Protection Act. We were taken to court, and this was over the course of 2.5 years. We were in court, and it wasn't. We were threatened with $5,000 to $20,000, $5,000 fines. All of this kind of stuff, and I think the fear for me was I'm not ma'a that legal space. Kealoha, she's ma'a with everything they've done with Mauna Kea for this whole time. I'm not ma'a. I didn't know how to navigate all of this stuff, and I had a lot of anger that I couldn't control. When we're in with the kanaloas, it's so easy to just boom, laser focus. But in this area, I had a hard time controlling things. And when you're dealing with legal stuff, you can do that apparently. So I was scared that we would misstep. And when you talked about precedent, that's what this was. Our case set precedent in how these agencies would then treat other practitioners, other communities who are called to the same work. So what happened to us, or what we agreed to or not, sets the precedent. Yeah. We were offered a deal. And I don't know what they were thinking. Like, do they not know who we are? Like, hello, we're not going to compromise our integrity. So the deal was, we'll drop the charges and everything goes away if you say publicly that you were wrong. You will never, you're going to, yeah, no. And we're like, do you not know who I am? Hello, what are you thinking? That is zero possibility, because we know what you're doing. That means that you're going to use that on every other community. No, negative. So that was no problem. But when it came to our actual court appearance, the thing that was really hard was we had to ho'oluhi other people in the community to testify. And the process that takes, and the emotional drain of 2.5 years of battling in court and being criminalized, and reputations being dragged through the mud, not just on our community side, but with the people that we are working with at the Marine Mammal Response Network. The sacrifices to their reputations and their careers because they chose to stand with us. That was a dark, dark time that I think we still have residuals about. In the end, we were found guilty and we filed whatever it is that you file to say, no, you guys should reconsider because you didn't look at these things. And it was going to go to another round. And then all of a sudden, it was November 2017. I was in a faculty meeting. My email comes up from our attorney, says that they just dropped the charges. So we're like, this is 2.5 years and like nothing, and no regard for what they left in their wake, not just in the communities that we had to ho'oluhi to tell their story and relive certain traumas that they had with the agency, but this whole process distracted us from what we were trying to do initially. We had huge festivals to bring awareness to Kanaloa, to have people feel the collective and feel that no matter where you are, you have a function and you have an invitation to be a part of this Kanaloa movement. It distracted all of that work because we had to focus solely on defense. So all of those things, not only were we in this space of all this negativity, we didn't have the positive influx that we used to have in working with community and being in the space of educational exchange and having people experience the kai. So I think I still get PTSD from that. But that was probably the hugest blow to this. But it pissed off a lot of people in community, and people were like, how do we step up to this kuleana? And we're still doing it. We're still gonna go to community regardless of what the threat is, because once you commit to these kanaloa, those kanavai are unbreakable. There's no question. So the kanavai of the colonizer is of no consequence to us. So we're going to continue to do this work. And did it make us stronger? Yes, in some cases, but it taught us, it gave us a little bit more training in konane, but it also kind of opened up this practice and our story to a lot of different communities that since then have gotten in touch with us, and we've been able to help them and educate them so that they know that as a community, as descendants of these akua, of these elder kanaloa, you have every right to malama these kupuna, malama these elders. And so now we're shifting our konane moves into how do we help communities and families advocate for their right to care for their ancestors.
You nailed it. And that was the ho'ina,
Yeah.
really, as a result of your journey. What has happened? And interestingly, sometimes it's that trauma that that plays on your vulnerability, and it maybe we'll never get over. And I don't think traumas are designed to get over. I think we just got to know how to house them. We got to, we got to find a particular space for that trauma, because you really can't get rid of it. It's embodied. But how do you use it to your advantage? How do you take this trauma and not be a victim by it? How can the trauma experience actually now push us into, liberate us into new considerations? You are able to face a reality of yours that only this trauma facing federal charges could have elicited, and so and now that discussion people are talking about it, and it's entering curriculum, that experience, all those newspaper clippings and all of that, that's entering into people's policies. It's driving. So there's this huge, as a result of your fascination with whales, just to be a whale sticker,
right?
It's not. It goes all the way to the federal level, and then the thing is, they just drop the charges. They just go, oh, I was, I'm ready for beef already. I mean, drop the charges, but I gotta punch somebody in the face because I lose my. We never have the Kanaloa festival, and we never go. So there are these exchanges, and And it's okay to be angry, because if I were to say that this process has no room for anger, then it would not be a true
Mm.
process, this ka'al process. A lot of anger. Hi'iaka had a lot of anger. Hi'iaka had a lot of vulnerabilities. She cried through
Oh,
her whole journey. Oh my goodness. Some versions of her story were like, oh my, this girl's gonna go dehydrated. She's crying and crying. But the crying is
yeah,
this
yeah.
detoxing. She had to all these mo'os lining up in her battle. Before she piled one mo'o, get rid of one, there's another one that's coming up. And so she had to do all of this in a time frame. And then now, your
Mm.
ha'ina. We have it's 6:25, and peoples, if you have to leave, mahalo anui. Just say, put your mahalo in the chat and leave. Go eat. Some of you look
I,
famished. Although some of you look like you just had dinner, but you might need a late supper, like in 10 minutes. This kind of discussion makes us, ho ale ale ke koko. It stirs the blood, which sometimes we gotta, eat food just to
mm.
calm it down. But Roxanne, you're gonna be not very soon, but eventually you'll be 80 years old, and maybe even, oh, let's say 80. You're gonna be an octogenarian. And when you look back at your life, yeah, so right now you're in the midst of it. You're still creating, you're still
Mm.
growing, you're still experiencing, you're still yelling at people, blowing. Oh God, thank God, you still have that whistle.
Whistle. Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
She's like a one-person Jeppio, like
It's a
always.
party whistle now.
And but you're going to be 80 years old, and guys, this is the same question to you folks. We're all going to be 80 at one point. I'm going to look back in Hawaii, we're still going to have our mountains because we fought for it. We're still going to have our oceans, and it's going to be teeming with vibrant life because we fought for it. Our rivers will run clean, and there'll be no spillage of fuels because we fought for it. We got Kaho'olawe back, but that's nothing to say that it's always guaranteed. We got to still continuously fight for it. People died for that in that movement, the ultimate sacrifice. What are we going to have? What are you going to have to say to this mo'opunas that's going to come and
Mm.
looking at you and hoping that your dentures stay in, because you're old and you're
Right?
whacking and you cannot even blow your whistle because your teeth could fly out.
I gotta have my kako blow my whistle for me.
But what is your ha'ina to these young kids?
Mm. So I kind of have our own haina. So everybody, gang signs up. Go make a gang sign. Okay. So this is something myself and my cousin Kihe Nahalea, we're working on a naming thing, and then this was born. And so we call it the Kanaloa gang sign, but it symbolizes so much in this aspect of haina. And I say that it's not a trend, it's a movement. Yeah, it's that kana, it's venturing beyond the comfortable and the safe of kanaka consciousness to pull things up from the depths, our subconscious, our internal reflection, our ancestral memory, and bring that closer to us and us closer to that. So you can see behind me what they're doing. They're sounding when the kohola do that. They're getting ready for the deep dive. Yeah, they're going to places where they go all the time, but we rarely go there physically and spiritually. And so what we want to do by this, and we have pictures of, we do this all the time with our kids, and and they don't know it, but that's imprinting. They may not understand exactly the complexity of it now, but they're going to remember that. And all of these experiences are going to cue them or trigger them in some way to be able to stretch like these kanaloa and to dig deep. And it's okay to not fully understand why there's a certain pull or why I'm having these certain dreams or why these tutu are coming to me in my consciousness or my subconsciousness. And it's okay to have to step outside the circle sometimes when there's no precedent. Yeah, because somebody got to be the first. But what we're also looking at, these guys, they come with a collective, especially these kohola. So who is in our kauhale? to my entire journey, I have never ever been by myself. Our kia'i, we work as a collective. When there's a response happening on one island, I may not be on island, but we're all on deck, ready as kako'o in the court case, everything. And I think that's part of who we are, is knowing that, yes, we can stand up there in the front because we have this whole collective, seen and unseen, with us. And they're the ones that fuel us. And trusting that we may not fully understand how I am able to know what this kanaloa is saying to me when we're in a pool and I'm holding him up, but trusting that I don't need to know how it's happening. I just know that it's happening and I have to figure out how to keep it happening. And it may not be you in a kanaloa in a space, but there's spaces where it's that venturing beyond the comfortable, that we're not ma'atu. Yeah. When we dive down, when you go dive down in the water at a certain place, your physical limitations push you to surface, hurry up, breath, or too heavy. But what we can learn from our kanaloa is how to stretch that. So maybe we will go maybe 1 foot deeper next time we dive, 2 feet deeper next time we dive. I'm going to pay a little bit more attention when I wake up and not jump to brush my teeth, but okay, what they was telling me, and to go back to those kinds of means of communication and trust the messages. And as crappy as it is, when you're in a situation and somebody tells you, well, things happen for a reason, being okay that, yeah, there's a bigger plan, that all of these other people that are moving us in certain directions. And when we feel the move, we got to at least try and holomoe in that direction. And if it gets a little bit that's fine. But we at least try that, and we stretch beyond the comfortable, or what we even think our own limitations are, which in a lot of cases are actually not the limitations. That's what we mentally are putting on ourselves. So all of those things I've learned through this journey, and from all of the people that continue to walk this journey with me.
So, I like that you say that this is when they're going to prepare to go for the deep dive. The deep dive. And many of us, we know we want to stay on the surface, so maybe we'll go a little bit, but the deep dive where it gets murky and where we cannot see.
It's dark.
It interesting? It's dark. Isn't it interesting that many of us are uncomfortable with the dark? Although our creation story says we descend from the dark. So that's a question I want to leave, and that's what this is reminding me of. And interesting, I've always known that I was a tangaro. I just really didn't know exactly what that meant in the ways of actions. Yeah, it's a nice story that's attached. Oh, tangaro, kanaloa, ta'aloa. Oh, it's a nice concept. It's a nice philosophy. It's a nice myth. But how do they transform into actions? Especially when the kanaloa is associated with a lot of darkness and the unconscious realms. And so that's what she's saying, before you get up and run, brush your teeth, shove it, pop in your tinted eye contacts, try to linger with your kanaloa for a little while, because there's always that residual messaging that's happening, in that transitional space. But isn't it interesting that we're uncomfortable being in the dark when we are descendants?
And we're born from the dark.
And of course, yes,
that's that kaikohola in there, right?
Yeah.
That kaikohola.
Yeah, we're born from the dark, and then we born into the light. But our creation chants never ever tell us we cannot return to the dark. We've just assumed that we should never be in the dark. But that's where some of our messaging comes from. So you interpret that in ways that you can relate to it. But when you're talking about they going for a deep dive, I'm like, how come it's very uncomfortable to go to do a deep dive in who we are? We like stay only on the surface, on the papa'u. Yeah, we like stay in the kaheka, in the tide pool. We don't like going to who we are. So that's a nice segue to the closing of this. This ka'au process is really this, preparing us to go into the deep dives, because we have to ask hard questions of ourselves. If we really gonna matter We have to ask questions of ourselves because nobody else will ask us. They only like know what we can do for them.
Yeah.
That's nature. And it's not a negative thing. We love to service people. We find a lot of joy and worth in servicing people. But that doesn't mean we don't go and understand who we are and how we are and why we are. We can service people better when we're full. So next time you read the Kumulipo, next time you chant the Kumulipo, can you invite yourself to go, we got to change the narrative. We got to stay in the light. Stay in the light. Stay in the light. Too much light and things no can grow. We need also to have the mahina in the moon moments. We need the dark. And I never make that up, but our stories say we descend from the dark. That means there should be some kind of kinship there. We just haven't been there for a couple of generations because we've been convinced we got to stay out of the dark. That's where the bad things live. That's not necessarily true. The whales live there, and they have a song for us in this case. For us to say mahalo to Roxane for really sharing her story, I want you to don't press yes now, Melanie Wilson. Don't jump this one. She's our dean. We just love our dean at the college. But what are you walking away with? Give me one sentence or one word or one phrase. Okay, don't go yet. The whales live there. Okay, just hold it. Hold it. Who's this? You guys don't press send yet. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a minute. What are you walking away with? And it can be a word, it can be an emotion, it can be a sentence, it could be an inspiration. But this woman gave something of herself. So why don't we, in our kako, in our culture, let's give something back. And welcome to the mound. I want to use that. Welcome to the pitcher's mound. Woo! Because we're pitching here. I want to Roxane, we gotta do that. And we gotta bring a whistle. Mōkaulele is gonna have a whistle. Okay, guys, are you ready? On a count of 3, I want you to press boom. 1, 2, 3.
Whoa.
Roxane, this
gang signs, yes.
Roxane, this is going to be recorded and the transcript. How early can we get, Roxane, this transcript? I should have done this for everybody else. My wife was last week. She shared some dark moments of her life. I'm going to depression. I had to tell her 2 days later, girl, I only understood. I didn't know you went through all of that. Where was I? I'm your husband. I'm supposed to be there to support you, but sometimes the best support is walking away and letting that person face it. Yeah, and but but this is all for you, Roxane. Thank you for triggering all of this. Your story triggers this. This is real stuff. And we have to feed ourselves, guys. So, next week is it next week, how Oli? When is Auntie Noi Noi going on?
Yes.
We have one last one for this season. It's next week, and Noi Noi Wong Wilson is also a graduate of the university system, and we work with her at Hawaii Community College and different arenas. And she was one of those arrested kupuna. Now, it's interesting because Noi Noi comes from Kailua Oahu, which is like gentrified. Yeah, I like to tease her about it because, if we're from Waiahole and somebody said, where you at? How come you act like you're from Kailua? We could take that as an insult. Now, if you're from Kailua, don't get offended. Yeah, we're just being honest here. If you're from the country and somebody says, how come you act like you're from Kailua? That's a little bit kind of insulting for us country people. Well, Noi Noi is a good friend of mine, and the baga is from Kailua. Kailua, that's how they say it, Kailua. But something happened in her life, and we're going to investigate what happened. How did her childhood prepare her for her actions on the mountain? How did her rearing prepare her to get handcuffed and dragged off the road? As a lineal descendant of this universe, how did it feel to be pulled off your own territory and saying, you don't have the right to do that? Let's clear the way so other people can outsiders can, that just in, you don't have to know the full story. You just have to know that they moved the native people off the trail so outsiders can come in. That's wrong and that's repeated in the history books, and it's kind of blurred in our history books. Yeah, people don't like to talk about stuff like that, but she will. We're not advocated for or against the mountain. We're advocating for leadership. And we want to know what her story is. I want you to come and intersect your story. Some of you guys are so young. I wish I had this when I was. You guys would be my best friend. I'll be addicted to this. You'd be my fascination. Growing up, having all these questions in me, and not having anyone to speak those questions to. My grandmother would do it, but then my parents separated, and so I didn't have my grandmother and my grandparents anymore, and I only had, and so Pele became my, and one day I'll tell you my Mōkaulele, how Pele became the person. I couldn't trust my human world, so it was about the deity that kept me going for this very difficult time of my life. And so we'll talk about that, because that's probably reflective of some of yours. But you young ones there, you're here, you get a head start. You get a head start. Do wonderful things. Do wonderful things, and never see yourself as, whether you're a kako'o or an alakai, it don't matter the title. It matters that we're doing something that's going to benefit our who we are, and other indigenous people are looking at us. They're learning from us, just as we're learning from them. We're learning from each other. Okay, so mahalo anui. Join us next week. We'll talk to Noi Noi, and yeah, and hope to plant. Or it's in you. Our job is just to trigger it to flourish. Roxane, thank you
Mahalo,
very
mahalo
very
Yoko.
much. And yeah, and pretty soon I can give you a big hug without masks. Yeah. Oh, so we were in an uniki a couple
Oh,
months ago, and Roxane was one of the alakais. She was so well
you see how
behaved.
he is. Are we gonna go
Together,
there?
well behaved.
Rocky never had
You need
Facebook
to have the
back
guy.
then, okay?
She never yelled at me. She never blew her whistle at me. She spoke to me in very humble tones. I was like, oh my gosh, gotta take an uniki to get her to
Stop it.
control her. Once the gods are removed from the scene, she's
Stop it.
wild. But thank you. Never lose that, Roxane. Never lose your wildness. Yeah. Keep it alive and functional. Thank you all. Have a good evening. And yeah, help me get rid of these cookies. Love you.
Riho
Bye.
Kako.
Roxanne,
Yes,
stay
yes,
on,
yes.
please.
Hi, T.